Okay, let's start this environment panel. I'm so excited to talk to the two of you about how digital wellness and the environment interact. My name is Tracy McDowell, and I teach digital feng shui at the Digital Wellness Institute. And I study this connection between feng shui and digital wellness. And that journey started for me because as a feng shui consultant, in my personal life and with my clients, I noticed that a lot of the remedies, which is what we call fixes, changes, optimizations in feng shui, didn't take because people would jump onto their phones or have a TV in their bedroom. And so the things that we were doing to help their lives rebalance, instead of working, were being sort of, toyed with by technology. And so I got involved with the Digital Wellness Collective, the first Digital Wellness Summit, and started really investigating how can we live with technology as a tool instead of it being the sort of tool that I felt like we were turning into for technology and for tech companies. And so I really care about the environment because as a feng shui consultant, I talk about people's physical spaces. But over time, what I've learned is that the digital spaces also have a huge impact on us. And those are their own environments in and of themselves. And so I'm really excited to talk to you guys about things like when you got your first cell phone and what you find significant about environments and technology. Especially, I always ask people, where do you keep your phone if you sleep with it in your room? What sort of natural light you're playing with? I think as doctors, you guys probably care a lot about that and have a lot of opinions on that. And then overall in feng shui, what I aim for is when a balanced space is balanced, we want your spirits to rise. We want you to feel good in it. And so I kind of want to, around those questions, create this dialogue about the environment and digital wellness. So I'm going to give you guys a moment to introduce yourselves as well. Whoever wants to hop in, just go for it.
Sure, I can start. My name is Dr. Sharmin Habib. I'm background is in optometry, and I've been working within the digital wellness space over the last 6 years or so. So I came more from a science kind of clinical background, but have now since moved into more product development and looking at technology more from a personal problem where, I diagnosed one of my patients with a chronic form of dry eye because he was on screens all day and it was starting to impact his physical health. And so we started a company where we started to, look at how can we develop a solution and build it around a form of routine relaxation that we can actually make space for in our day to actively disconnect and to welcome that. And so that therapeutic kind of approach has now helped us kind of focus more on, how are we spending our day with technology? What is it that we're focusing on? And can we maybe take a few moments to, sit and do nothing and give ourselves a little bit of that time to restore both mind and body? And so it's a very interesting space and something I'm very deeply passionate about and have enjoyed being in. And some of the things that you mentioned, I laughed, Tracy, because I got my first cell phone when I was in high school, and it was very different because now I have 7-year-old twins and they're already at the phone trying to navigate and teach me stuff. So it's a very different time and it's changing very quickly. And it's a little scary, right? Because when you talk about what is that in part, what kind of feeling or energy do we get from our technology and the environment around us? In a subtle way, there's a lot, I think, that's influencing us. And sometimes it's moving so quickly that we don't really have a moment to realize the impacts. So for myself, I kind of do a few things to kind of consciously separate myself. So I don't keep my phone in my bedroom, not more so because, I've been told that this is not a good thing to do, but more because it's a symbol and a signal to me that, okay, there's a little bit of space here that now I'm going screen free and I can kind of disconnect and spend some more time inwards.
Totally. Can you tell everyone what kind of doctor you are? I think that's very important in this environment understanding.
Yeah, so my background is optometry. So eye health and kind of I see patients who come in for their general eye health needs starting off from prescriptions to also like the ocular health. And so now in the last 10 years, I would say about 90% of my patients are coming in with some sort of dry eye or digital eye strain associated with their screen time habits. It's actually become the number one reason that we start to see patients come into clinic.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm excited to dive a little more and explore that. Anna, do you want to tell us a bit about what you do and how you relate to the environment and your background?
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here today. Happy Digital Wellness Day. So I am a researcher by training. My background is in psychology and neuroscience. And for the past decade or so, I've been studying how people interact in digital environments. So my interest started when I was a researcher early on in my life and was looking at studying social isolation. And I was actually doing this work in rodents. And I realized there's the internet out there where I don't need to use an animal model to understand how social isolation affects our bodies. I can, in our minds, I can study humans in the natural environment, which has now been enabled with technology. So this idea that we're, communicating and interacting through these artificial or simulated environments really captivated me. So since that time, I've been looking at different types of digital environments, both virtual worlds, video conferencing, text-based interactions, and seeing how people interact in those, and specifically focusing on how we navigate these environments and in terms of nonverbal cues. So how we communicate body language in these environments, because certainly we are very restricted in what we're seeing when we are interacting this way. So this is what I've been doing for the past decade or so, and I've also gotten connected with the digital wellness world, and I'm really excited to kind of get to know everyone doing such wonderful work in this space. In terms of when I first got my phone, I was, this is where we're showing our age. I was also in high school, and the reason I got a cell phone is because I was driving quite a long distance to school. My parents had moved away a little far away from town, so I needed a phone because I got in a car accident one time and I, didn't have one. And from that day on, having a phone really gave me that sense of security. And this is one of the things that people, see now when we use our phone. We bring this sense of security with us everywhere we go when we have our phone with us, right? To answer your second question, since we're doing that.
Well, I wanted to first respond to that because I got my first phone as a middle schooler, and I had a similar experience. My mom, like the bus got stuck somewhere that was driving us back from middle school, and we couldn't tell her. She was terrified. Cell phones had just come out. And like, I'd say the next week, almost everyone in our grade had a cell phone because all the parents were like, well, we need to know where you are. We need to know that you're safe. And so I think it's really important to ask that question about the environment, because I think this is happening so fast. Like you said, like your twins now are using a cell phone and they're like interested, they like tinker on it, but we didn't have that. We had a completely different way of growing up. And so I think it's a good thing to ground ourselves in. It's been this epic tool for us, but then what are the side effects? And so I'm so happy that you two are actually seeing, talking to, researching those side effects in real time.
Absolutely.
So cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to jump into sort of that second question of like, what do you find significant when it comes to your environment and technology? I'd love to hear what you think.
Sure. Do you want me to go, Tracy? Was that direct?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so I wanted to address the issue of sleeping with the phone, because I think that to me, that was one of those, that you mentioned that at the beginning, whether I have my phone in the bedroom or not. And I feel like for me, that was really something that made me realize the impact of technology. I was actually suffering from insomnia, and I realized how beneficial it was to not have my phone in the bedroom, when I was struggling with this. And I mean, it's not like it cured it, certainly, but it's made a difference. And since then, I don't go back. I haven't had my phone in the bedroom. So I think, that's a really great example of how our environment and what we put in it, what we surround ourselves with, can affect how we deal with whatever condition issues or maybe mental health concerns we have, or just day-to-day things, right? It does, that interaction with the environment is there, and it is definitely influential.
Sharmin, I want to jump to you about technology, blue light, why it keeps us up, insomnia and things like that. But before I say that, I want to say with my feng shui clients, I always encourage them to take any screens out of their bedroom. And my sort of default answer for anyone that ever asks is that bedrooms are for rest and romance. So if those are not contributing to rest or romance, that's when I have people remove them from the environment so that that specific space can encourage those things. But I'd love to hear more about sort of how you feel like blue light is affecting people's sleep, because I'm sure you know more about it than me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, and I think a lot of both clinicians as well as consumers are becoming more and more aware of this idea of blue light, sleep hygiene, and what's the environment that's ideal for the bedroom. So I think there's a couple things. I think one is that it's a symbol, it's a signal to our body and our mind that, like, okay, when we remove the technology from the bedroom, we're now allowing our minds to kind of say, okay, this is time for rest, right? And that there's a disconnect there. Because there's a lot of new concepts that are starting to come out. Some of them you might have heard are like revenge bedtime procrastination, where we're like tired, but we're yet kind of gravitating to our Netflix or doom scrolling like 1 or 2 more times before bed, just to kind of help us wind down in a different way. And that tends to become more and more related to a screen, right? So there's that concept. There's also this other idea of anticipatory anxiety, where we start to feel anxious or fearful, like, oh, I thought my phone rang, forgot magical with our technology. And when we don't remove that at any part of our day, we start to kind of respond in a physical way where there's a kind of an addictive component to it. When it comes to the blue light, I get a lot of patients asking me, like, do blue light glasses help me with my eye strain, or feeling that they're doing something positive because they're wearing their blue light blockers, yet still staying 13 hours a day on their screens, right? But I think this is a really good opportunity for us to start having a discussion about the kind of miseducation around blue light. And currently there isn't any strong enough evidence that I have read or come across to support that blue light is blocking that blue light is going to prevent our eye strain and digital fatigue. Now, when I say that, it's because when you look at the science, it's become a little bit less about the blue light itself and more about the device's ability to increase our alertness or our physiological arousal, it's called, in our brain. So when we get this exposure of blue light constantly throughout the day through our devices, it's starting to impact more so our sleep and stress hormones in the body, or our sleep-wake cycles, more than it is our eye muscles and the strain that we feel from focusing up close all day long. And so what I tell patients is that, we're looking at blue light, yes, but blue light is actually beneficial in a lot of ways when we first wake up in the morning, right? We want to have that natural light as much as possible to really jumpstart our day and allow our body to function optimally. But when we wind down at the end of the day, this is where we want to cut down the blue light. And so if you're going to be wearing blue light blockers and you're wearing them all day long, we're starting to kind of interfere with our natural rhythms. So that's the one kind of education piece. And the second is that if we really want to start intervening in the impacts of technology physically and kind of mentally on our body, we need to look at habit and like our behaviors and how we're, spending our times and how we're winding down. So those last few hours right before bed are really critical, and just removing our engagement with technology so that we're not going to bed with our minds active. And that is where the impacts to sleep start to come. So I'll pause there. I'm sure there's some questions around that.
Yeah, I have so many things I want to jump off with that, but I think the most important one that I've noticed work well for clients for your actual physical environment is I will put in a room a light that is for daytime. If, like, let's say we're doing a panel like this and we need light. And I will also put in like a Himalayan salt lamp or a dimmable bulb, and then encourage people to use that one at night to sort of tell their brains like, hey, we're kind of slowing down and tuning things out. Yeah. So I know that that's a very effective tool I've seen with people. And I wanted to say, when blue light glasses came out, I wore them all day for 2 months. I was so excited. I was like, this is great. and I got headaches. So I don't know if that's something other people experience, but it's good to hear from you as like an eye doctor that we don't need them all the time, and that's not what they're for. It makes me feel more grounded in the not using them.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say, I love what you said, Tracy, about different light levels. It's not just about the light from your screen, but just regulating light levels in your household throughout the day, right? Because we evolved with, light that changes according to the movement of the sun. And so now we have light, artificial light of all kinds, right? That we have to adapt to. And so I really love this idea of having light reflect of the sort of setting the mood for the evening, and sort of teaching also your family about that, right?
Something I was excited to ask you about researching people in these digital environments is how many people do you feel like are using natural light in their like office spaces, Zoom conversations? Like, can you tell the difference between the types of light that people have in their environments when you're researching and trying to understand these like environments that we've created, like this space?
Yeah, my research actually doesn't focus so much on, I really primarily spent most of my time in the digital side of the environment. Maybe Sharmin can have some insights on that.
I don't have any like specific numbers on natural, like amount of natural light in people's office spaces. I think that we don't get out enough in the natural light during our day. So maybe encouraging that and kind of providing education around that. It's hard to say, but I think people are aware that, taking a walk like in the middle of their day makes them feel good. And it could be, something that we can branch off and continue to educate people on because of those benefits. And like you mentioned, the lighting and the angle of lighting. One of the reasons why it helps people is because there's different angles that we're getting through light being absorbed through our eyes. So first thing in the morning, it's at a higher angle, and that stimulates cells, receptors in our eye that stimulate wakefulness. Versus at the end of the day, like after dinner, people for a walk, it's coming in at a lower angle, and that's inducing like a wind down, kind of winding down our nervous system. So if we could spend all day outside, it'd be great for us.
Totally. And I think the first step is encouraging people to have their desk, office, workspaces near a source of natural light, if possible. And it's so easy, but I notice with people I talk to that often their desks are like tucked in a corner somewhere and they don't have a window or don't have anything. So I think we can definitely get to that point. Anna, did you answer if you sleep with you said at the beginning you don't sleep with your phone in your room. And Sharmin, do you sleep with your phone in your room?
No, not at all. It's in my bathroom. I have a little charging station there.
That's it. I think that's a good.
I have to show off my cool my tool that I use for our family digital devices. Maybe that doesn't show up with my background, but got this nice unplugged box that was a gift from Nina Herscher, who's the organizer of today's event. But it's been wonderful to have a place for everyone to put their devices in the house, and it kind of almost creates this hub, that everyone remembers. That's where everything goes. And also, if you lose your stuff, you know where to look first. That always there. But so having these cues around the house to help you also navigate what to do with technology at different times of the day, I think that's a great feature to incorporate for sure. And not in the bed.
And I'm glad it works too. I think it's always good to see people like say like this is working, because I'm always more likely to jump on board when I see that.
For sure. I wanted to bring up another issue around also as we think about the environment in our in our daily life. There's also this interface of the virtual and the digital environment, right? So there's setting up our digital environment, the environment that we sit in is one thing, but then there's also this interface of what happens when we sort of interact in this digital environment. And I like to bring up this metaphor of a filter, that there's our screen provides this filter into the digital world. And often when we're interacting socially, it's cutting out a lot of information that we are expressing. So the other people who, as in this call, may be interacting with us are not aware of what my environment may be and what the rest of my body looks like and what it's, what my body language is beyond what you can see on the screen, or if there's things cutting out on the screen. So that's all you may not hear, people are saying. So this is all part of the environment as well, is that we're sort of immersed in these two different worlds, which I find that as a fascinating aspect of sort of thinking about what digital life is like. This interface, right, that we're communicating through.
I love the idea of a digital filter. And when we had previously chatted about it, I told my partner, and he was like, you mean how I'll go to work in a suit jacket, but like my boxers? I'm like, exactly. Like, we have created an environment where people can only see what we're allowing them to see. And so that's so interesting, because in some ways the environment is now more comfortable for him. He just like walks down to his little home office, sits down. But it's not the same thing as I think what you were probably studying when you began studying relationships with other people. Like, just so different.
Yeah, that is the challenge, right? That we're facing, is in terms of navigating these environments. We, in a face-to-face interaction, in a group setting, we can respond to people more easily because we're more sort of accustomed to picking up on body language cues from others. Whereas in virtual settings, it's a little bit more tricky to do so effectively. And the good news is, though, that we are very adaptable. We can overcome different challenges. So, we've invented things like memes and emojis to overcome sort of this digital filter, the barriers of our digital world. So, that is kind of a really neat aspect of our ability to communicate. But at the same time, we have sort of our nervous system has certain expectations for a certain type of input when we interact socially. Some of that actually also involves touch and physical proximity and physical contact. Certainly, we're not getting that through screens, right? So that's something else also to consider as we think about this environment that we project ourselves into. Is very different from the environment that our bodies expect to be interacting in as well, right? So our responses are a bit different. What others sort of, it's like this two-way street. I tell you something, it's like the telephone game, I express something and I expect that you understood what I meant, and then you reply, and I sort of have this impression of what you've expressed, but it may get sort of lost in translation there through the filter. So, and this is particularly challenging when we're talking about in human interactions, like expressing empathy or compassion over these devices, more complex emotions, complex feelings, right? Or, it's difficult to navigate that for sure.
Yeah. Sharmin, as a doctor, are you in the office? Have you been doing teledoc consultations? Like, what is your experience with the digital versus like the physical experience of working with someone?
Well, I'm kind of lucky because most of my patients are still coming into clinic, so I still have like that physical kind of contact in space. But with my company, I'm at a desk like everyone else, right? Working a 9 to 5 in front of a computer screen, and sometimes we're all day in meetings. And I have never looked at myself in the screen when I'm talking to somebody. Like, we're not used to looking at ourselves, right? So sometimes it's just like you want to turn your camera off, because part of like these external stimuli that we're being exposed to is starting to kind of interrupt that one-on-one connection you have with someone, where it's just about you and them and getting that feedback and that energy. And there's like these other kind of ingredients now in the mix that take you away from it, the reality of that. So I've been able to experience both sides of it. And I think that whole idea of Zoom fatigue, like, it's very real. Like, people are drained out at the end of the day. And I think paying attention to that energy that we feel after being on calls all day is something to note, right? And sometimes taking an active walk outside or going on a phone call instead is helpful. So yeah, I kind of resonate with all the comments that Anna made as well, because kind of scary. It's kind of scary where we're more comfortable to connect behind a screen than it is in real life.
Do you ever advise your patients to create more like sort of sustainable environments. And I ask this because I want Anna to talk about like sustainable digital environments, but I think that just good environments, like the things that I do where I talk about ergonomics, like what sort of chair are you sitting in? Can your feet touch the floor? Have you talked about that with your patients? Do you feel like it's helping?
Yeah, we kind of run through a series of tools, and usually because there's a pain point or a symptom, right? So when you're sitting at your desk, for example, having the top of your screen at eye level so that you can look down is helpful. Taking breaks, we use something called the 20-20-20 rule, which is every 20 minutes, you look far away, you blink for 20 seconds, and you continue. It sounds really simple and kind of, but at the same time, just even implementing that concept to take a bit of a break is really hard for people. So it's kind of about empowering people to like give yourself a few minutes, like just take a minute to, restore that strain on your eyes as well as your mind. And then I really talk about space, like, creating those few moments, like right before you go to bed, or be conscious of going to sleep and in the morning are so critical because they're your moments and they physically impact your body, right? They help you to kind of wind down and rest. And then they also give your mind that bit of a break, right? So those are kind of the areas that I focus on. But yeah, I think the more and more awareness and education we can give, it helps people, because I think we're all aware now. We know that this is a problem, but what tangibly can we do about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I think the other thing is looking for tools that don't necessarily like band-aid our problems. So like I think everyone I know has like a bottle of eye drops at their desk because their eyes are feeling strained, and it's more about like, well, what can I do to cut down those impacts, right? So those behavior changes, and what's really going to give me a sustainable solution.
Definitely. Well, I think we're at almost our 30-minute mark, so we should all probably look for 20 seconds away from our computer, blink 20 times.
Everyone,
we gotta practice what we preach, guys. Because it looks weird, right? Do I look strange when I like?
Yeah, no, it's true. So let's normalize it. Let's normalize it. I'll take a little pause, look away.
Turn off your screen.
Look out the window.
Look away.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, what are some things that we should keep in mind as we create or develop digital environments so that they can be like sustainable digital environments? So rather than those physical practices, like what do you think we can do to make the environment easier?
Yeah, so I really love the idea of a sustainable environment, because we talk about this a lot now with our natural environment. How do we make our planet sustainable for us humans? How do we, continue and flourish in our world? So I'd like to think about also creating environments. And when I say sustainable, really what I mean is sustainable for us humans. And, we love technology. We love all the things that it does for us. But let's, think about how we can make it also benefit us, our health and our well-being. So that's really what I mean when I'm talking about sustainable digital environment. So it's not only the digital, it's not only the physical, it's really that interface, right? What is your body doing when you are in a digital environment? So, setting up the space where your body is, positioned at the time. And then as we embody different sort of identities, different experiences in the virtual world, what does that look like for us? How is that benefiting us? So for instance, one example is when we create online communities, thinking about online communities in a sustainable way. How do we sort of do it in a way that nourishes people who are there? How do we sort of address the limitations of our physical bodies when we are entering digital spaces? So I always like to say, when we think about having digital connections or virtual connections on social media, we're only really cognitively capable of maintaining so many social connections, right? There's like a limit, which is like 150 or so. So this idea of focusing on creating quality connections versus quantity, right? So that is a huge sort of discussion when we talk about sustainability, right? And I think that can apply to digital environments as well.
Do you feel like human connection, like is there a similarity or difference between like real life and digital environments when you're cultivating human connection? Because I know you just said that we can only have so many or whatever, but I feel like with my Instagram feed, right, I have my business one for digital feng shui, I have my personal one to keep track of my friends, and overall I have thousands of people that are watching things and interacting with things, and I don't know, I don't feel that close to any of them, but I do feel like if I didn't do it, that would be very odd. Like those environments would suffer or do suffer when I, take a break for 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah. So this is sort of, to me, it's almost like we have to reimagine what we want that experience to be like for us, because that sounds like a very overwhelming situation. And I think that's very typical. I think we're all experiencing this, especially people who are really engaged online and have a business or have something where they have to interact online. So, I don't have necessarily a simple solution for this, but this idea of focusing on quality, not trying to, we have this FOMO experience that if we don't do it all, if we don't connect with everyone, if we don't reach out to everybody today, we're going to miss out on something, right? So this idea of focus and then intentionality, and we've talked about intentionality all day today, all the panels have mentioned this, but bringing this into the experience that we want to have in our day, with those around us. So, certainly you're not going to be able to connect with all of the thousands of people that may be following what you're doing, but cutting out time to create for certain groups or certain individuals. We're restricted in the physical space by geographical proximity. In the digital space, we're restricted really by our cognitive capacity to engage with all these people, right? So, and I think we need to acknowledge that and normalize it, and sort of structure our relationships in a way where we don't have to feel this obligation to be in touch with everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Anna. Very, very nicely said, because I think, and I said that because I think it's so important you should say it again, because our attention means something and it's worth something. And I think like with this constant pull and like kind of the addictive nature that our devices have on us, we're not realizing that. And it's so easy to say yes than it is to say no. Like I'll give you an example. Like when we look into a screen, something that we probably don't think about is how often we blink. We blink about 50% less just from like looking at a screen or focusing on something up close. And you say, okay, well, who cares? What's the big deal, right? It's a blink. But the blink, sure, it helps refresh our eyes and prevent our eyes from drying out. But it also is a break for our mind to just process the information that we're consuming. So more than it is physically protecting our eyes, it's actually trying to protect our mind, just to give ourselves a little bit of that pause. To what Anna was saying, is that cognitive load is becoming really hard to manage.
Wow. Yeah, in my digital feng shui unit, I talk about the attention economy a lot at the beginning. And I feel like this change, going back to when we all got cell phones, it's happened so quickly. It just feels like people don't have even the language to know, like, oh, there's this new environment, and that is my desktop, my phone, my messages, my whatever. And so I'm going to use that little nugget of like, we need to blink to process, and we're taking away those moments of processing by constantly being on these devices. And I think that's really powerful, because the attention economy came on real fast. Like this did not exist to the same extent when I was little, at least.
Yeah, there's a sense of, with everything, this unhindered growth, that we're constantly going to be growing. We talk about this in industry, we talk about this in the tech industry especially. We talk about this in productivity, and this was mentioned earlier today at the productivity panel, that we got to start thinking of productivity in a different way, where it's not just doing more, but just what can you do in the time that you have to honor your body and have a healthy and balanced life, right? So this idea that, we can just exponentially grow and be more productive, there's a limit, but let's acknowledge that limit. And, acknowledge the unfortunate limitations, or fortunate, let's say, limitations of our body, cognitive and physical, and support our body to be able to do what it does so well when we sort of nourish it in a sense, right? So it's just like with diet or anything else, it does require some effort to support our body to be healthy. But also, I'd like to say that this is not something any one person can do alone, right?
Totally. Oh, yeah, you can't do this alone. I think one of the things that I see the most with the people I help clean out their email inboxes, because feng shui, the first tenet of feng shui is clear clutter. If you have clutter, think of it as a river. Like that's when the river fills with sticks and twigs and things, and then the water stops. And we want the water to flow easily. And so we have to clear the clutter. But our email inboxes are just this like surreal nexus of people just keeping things as an archive and forgetting that the original inboxes on people's desks, the intention was for your inbox to be empty at the end of the day. And then people would fill it up and you'd like do the things that are in the inbox and then you'd get rid of them. And instead, now we have these just masses of things connected to our being, our name, our like existence. And when people clear them, it's like surprising how much freer and better they feel. And so I think that's a great example of just that digital space, those digital environments having a huge effect on us that we haven't even like caught up to them being an issue yet.
Well, each of those emails probably comes with some sort of demand on your time or your attention or a need that you're being asked. And so how many people can you serve at the same time, right? And that takes away room from yourself. And the other impact of that is our children, right? Like children at a young age model, like they want to model the adults around them. And so if they start to grow up seeing us constantly connected 10, 13 hours a day and not taking those moments to just declutter and take space, then we're kind of creating the next generations, we're teaching them how to handle. And I don't know if we're doing a good enough job of that if we can't kind of implement some pauses for ourselves that are healthy.
I totally agree. And I wanted to ask Anna a little bit on that like idea of there being more and more and more. You're doing a lot of research on the metaverse. Can you talk about like that being a virtual environment where people are going to gather and like maybe in this idea of like, if I got a bunch of mailers in my physical mail, all these papers that say things the same way as like when we subscribe to an email, it can be very overwhelming to have that much physical paperwork. But now we're going to have all this digital paperwork and clutter. Like, what do you think the metaverse is going to be for human connection, for like our just ability to be balanced?
Yeah, it's really a brave new world with the metaverse. And in some ways, the metaverse has been around for a long time. A lot of the gaming worlds that exist, for instance, Second Life, that's been around for 2 decades now, is a version of the metaverse, an early version that wasn't a VR-based one. So these environments have existed, and there's been a lot of positives in them. What people like about them is that when they gather, they have the sense of being together in the same place. So they kind of have this shared experience, and they share what they're seeing in their environment. So there's that really helps with connection for sure. But because now this environment can be filled with immense possibilities of things to do, and the numbers of people, like you can only get so many people into a room. You can get a lot of people into a virtual room, right?
Yeah.
So obviously we're going to have to think of boundaries around that. But I think we're going to have to reimagine a little bit what we want those experiences to be like, and what the limitations that we're going to have to put on our experiences there are going to be. There's definitely a sort of physical limitation too with the metaverse, right? Because you're going to be in a body that is in a space, but your mind is going to think that you're somewhere else. Like, how's that going to make us feel about our bodies? Are we going to completely feel disembodied and less aware of our physical bodies, right? That's kind of an issue that is really interesting to me, how we're going to navigate that, and what if we're going to see, any further concerns around physical health with the metaverse. Even though you can kind of move around, but it's not like you're going to be running a marathon in there. Like you're going to be still constrained in a room or in a chair. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things that we can do to promote connection in those spaces. But I think really thinking about the boundaries that we have to put in, these digital boundaries within that space, are going to be really important.
Yeah. Sharmin, do you feel like those are going to come from the people that are using the screens, or do you think that's going to be something that we have to start like I don't know, making boundaries and like, how do you think we're going to teach people about this? Because right now you're really the first line of defense. Like they get dry eye, they come to you and you're the one saying like, this is how we're going to deal with it.
To be honest, like it scares the crap out of me. I have no idea, like, the potential of what that's going to mean and how we're going to navigate it, because my work involves a lot of like how we're, how the screens are physically impacting our health. But at some point we won't have screens and we're still going to have connection, some sort of, and how we're going to navigate that. So this is why I kind of really harp on behavior and habits and space. So regardless of what that influx is coming from and in whatever mode, we've preserved and protected the space for disconnection as much as we have connection, so that we can be more conscious about it. Beyond that, like to me, like that's the fundamental and foundational principle, because the technology is going to continue to evolve beyond, and we don't want to stop that. In some ways we want to continue to evolve with it, but at the same time just protect a little bit of that space. So I think even for colleagues in my profession, I think it's very important that we are, being open-minded about how we're going to be seeing this problem in a different way and continuing to educate ourselves, incorporating more and more wellness into, our profession. And it's hard sometimes for even my colleagues to change, because very clinical, very science-based, like, this is how we see a problem and we solve it. And I speak from experience in having to evolve that way. So I think it's going to be interesting conversations that will come.
Totally. We have about 3 more minutes. So is there anything anyone like really wants to put out there and make sure that people are hearing about the environment?
I guess I just want to acknowledge this discussion about the metaverse. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and a lot of opportunities for people who may not have access to connecting, just like with Zoom becoming so popular now. So we have to balance the opportunities for certain individuals who wouldn't otherwise be able to access certain things and to connect as well. So not just to think of the negative, but really this to go forward with this idea of imagining what we want this world to look like. As we think about what we want our planet to be like, we also, now our planet extends into this digital world. Like it's kind of an amazing concept if you think about it.
Yeah. And I posted something that said it's like the Wild West. I feel like, especially when people were trying to buy .com, like endings of websites, like I feel like the metaverse, it's sort of like the Wild West. It's very unregulated. I mean, you know more about the metaverse than me, but I see it as very unregulated.
Yeah, and I think it's generally, applies to other aspects of the internet as well. There are certainly some things that are more regulated, some things that are less regulated, but we're learning about some of the impacts. And actually, we have a lot of things that we have learned about the internet and social media that we can now sort of apply to the metaverse. Like we already have 2 decades behind us, right? So I think we're coming at it with a lot of sort of background already, and we can start reimagining it in a different way.
Yeah, well, I hope that people consult you about how to make the metaverse environment sustainable, because I feel like that is definitely important to see moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a team effort here. We've got a lot of people to really collaborate, and that's what we're really good at. We're really good at collaborating as humans, and we can actually build something that we love and that serves us well. And that's not just metaverse, that's just, the internet in general.
Yeah, I mean, none of us had really chatted before, and I feel like this was a very productive conversation. I got a lot of little nuggets that I'm excited to play with. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, all the people that are here to this Digital Wellness Day Summit. What we talked about today is just the beginning, so please stay tuned, watch the other panels. They're all going to be equally as interesting and exciting, and join any of the other events that are out there. And thank you guys both so much. Like I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
It was great. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Awesome.